With all of this in place, our user can perform authentication using the provided fields. However, the UI only currently supports a default authentication type, which is currently configured to be sign-in. This means that if the user does not currently have an account, they won't actually be able to create one using our form. Now, we're going to go ahead and define a button that allows the user to toggle between these two states, recomposing our authentication form to reflect the current authentication mode. We'll start here by creating a new file and composable called toggle authentication mode. With this composable function in place, we can now build out the content required to display our toggle button. We're going to start by defining the use of a surface, which will act as a container for our toggle composable. The surface composable will compose the provided body inside of a box. It will also theme itself using the surface color from the application theme. This saves us from using a box composable and applying a collection of stylings ourselves, when this component already exists to do it for us. When composing this, we'll apply the modifier from the argument of our composable function, along with overriding the default elevation of the surface with a value of 8 dp. Next, we're going to add a button to our service, and for this, we'll use a text button composable. This is a composable offered by the Compose Material package, which allows us to compose a flat button that displays some composable content for its body. When composing a text button, we will need to provide an on-click handler and some content body to be displayed within the composable button. Before we add this composable, we'll go ahead and add some additional resources to be used for the body. These will be two string resources, one to ask the user if they need an account, and one to ask them if they already have an account. Now, we'll use the content property of the text button so that we can see some form of visual result on the screen. Before we can do this though, we actually need to know the current authentication mode. So we'll add this as an argument to our composable function, and then we'll use this for the composition of our text composable. We'll add a text composable here, where it will display the content of a string resource, one of the ones we just created, depending on the current authentication mode that is represented by our state. Finally, we need to handle the on-click callback for our text button. When the button is clicked, we want to trigger an event that will change the authentication mode for the state of our screen. This will be an event in the form of toggle authentication mode, which we created in an earlier section. Again, we'll want to pass this event up to the parent, so we'll define a new lambda argument for our composable function, and then we'll trigger this within the on-click callback of the text button. We're going to quickly create a preview for our composable so we can see how things are looking. Then we're going to hop up to the parent composable authentication form so we can compose this in place. We'll compose a toggle authentication form, passing in the authentication mode that's passed already into our form composable, and then pass a modifier to instruct us to fill the maximum available width. Before we can handle the click event, we're going to add a new lambda argument to our form composable. This doesn't need to take any arguments, it's just an empty lambda. And then we'll trigger this within the on-click callback for the toggle authentication mode composable. We'll also update our preview to satisfy this requirement, and then hop up to the content composable parent, and then trigger the handle event function using the toggle authentication mode event. Again, no arguments required here, this is just an object type. We'll then be able to update our preview and see that this button is being composed in our card UI. One thing to note here though is that this is very condensed. We actually want our already have content button to be pushed to the bottom of the screen. For this, we're going to use a spacer composable, but this time we're going to give it a weight instead of a fixed height or width. Now, this will push the button all the way to the bottom of the screen based on the available space that the whole composable has. We can see now that this pushes it all the way to the bottom, and our authentication form is starting to look quite complete.